Hello and welcome to another WhatCulture Wrestling podcast here in Wacky Summer. It's another one we decided to do as a bit of a special edition, and you can see that because I am joined for the first time in about a year by Josh Brown.
Been a long time.
On the WhatCulture Wrestling podcast. We'd had a bit of a chat about what we could discuss today. This time last year, it was about the Fed being class and hot, but it's gone a bit rubbish. So what we're doing is instead bringing you in for something we've trialed a bit on the channel. It's called the 7 Wrestlers Theory. Wilborn brought it to our attention, / stole it from Reddit.
Of course.
That's what he does. And basically, it summarizes that every single wrestling fan, whether you're kind of deep in the weeds, a total nerd, like I might be, or yourself, somebody that kind of dips in and out, can be casual, can be sometimes in it, can sometimes not, can be summed up by their specific feelings on 7 specific wrestlers with a few leading questions about those wrestlers. And we're going to do that today. And it's going to, I think at least, open your wrestling tastes up even more to those of our viewers and listeners that maybe don't know that WhatCulture Gaming's own Josh Brown has such a more of a lore with wrestling than people might think.
Yeah, a little bit.
Before we get started, I suppose, to kind of pick up on the last time we spoke about pro wrestling, where are you at with it currently as we sit here in 2025?
Well, this is it. I'm not saying that I feel a little bit swindled coming onto this podcast, but I was under the impression that I was going to get to shoot on Bill Goldberg, I was going to get to shoot on Travis Scott, and I was going to get to shoot on the entirety of the Fed, all told.
That's 2 of your 7, right? It's like
yeah, you're right. No, I've cooled on it a little bit. Primarily thanks to that WrestleMania main event between John Cena and Cody Rhodes, which in execution, in theory, in storyline, is exactly what I wanted, right? I actually wanted Cody to concede the title, get beaten, John to turn heel, have this run where he has managed to gain and break this record whilst being an absolute bad guy. But just in terms of how that storyline was executed, it left me feeling so hollow and so cold on the whole thing that I was almost thinking like I might be out now. And it was the triple threat that kind of got me back in and made me think, oh, I'm being silly. I'm letting the emotions get the best of me. So it's been a bit of an up and down year in that regard. There has still been a lot that I've enjoyed, a lot of storylines that I have still been following and I think have been mostly executed well. But it all comes with a bit of a caveat, and even stuff that I was really looking forward to. CM Punk and John Cena, that was the sort of match that I was looking forward to most this year after we got like the nice little teasers at Elimination Chamber and even Royal Rumble. But then, the way that thing was executed, it left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. So I'm not like completely out on it by any means in terms of the Fed. And it has had a nice knock-on effect that it has brought me to other promotions that I've been keeping my eye on a little bit more than I was when
you
the
didn't
Fed
tell me this before we came
was red hot. I was watching TNA clips the other night.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, no.
I thought this was some sort of like guerrilla attack there, where you're gonna like this was a Trojan horse some AEW praise, which is welcome in small doors. No,
Scott Tailford's finally won.
That's it. You're with Scott enough. Like he's got that influence on you. TNA.
It was just a dumb flirtation because of primarily the little collaboration that they've got with the Fed right now. You know, I kind of, as we'll get to in a little bit, because I am a child of my generation, I'm in love with the Hardy Boyz still.
Right, okay.
And I was dipping back in at the weekend to watch them win the belts again and have bloody Jeff on the big... on the big ladder. Love that stuff. So it's not like I'm jumping ship entirely, but I have been... looking to other places to try and get the fix that I was enjoying so much this time last year.
That is, that's like WWE's nightmare scenario at like a corporate level. There's this, I don't know if you're sort of aware of this historic precedence that when WWE gets hot, all of the wrestling suffers.
Right.
It's the market leader control that they enjoy having, basically. It's this idea that like by being the biggest and the most visible and the most accessible, especially now, more than ever really on Netflix, the idea that, you're into wrestling, are you? Well, let's bring you in for the only wrestling you'll ever need. That's been like sort of a company policy all these years, to the point where obviously the 18-year monopoly that like WWE held before the launch of AEW, TNA has never really been able to consider itself a number 2.
Yeah.
Despite a lot of grifters here in 2025 trying to make it so, really only to peck at AEW's actual position as the challenger brand in North America. They like it that if you're not really feeling WWE, go and enjoy television, go and enjoy some film, go and enjoy other kinds of cinema. Yeah. And then when you're ready for wrestling, we're right here waiting for you. They, like that idea that they can be the gateway is not an audience profile I like to sort of advocate for, which is interesting that you say that like with but this is like the journey that a lot of wrestling fans go through, because WWE is what a lot of people find first, and it's then when you veer outside. To me, it was to TNA, later to New Japan, ECW in the 1990s in particular. It's interesting that that's still happening now, and you've kind of you're not just switched off. You've actually looked elsewhere a little bit.
Yeah, because, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that I've always followed these promotions, but I have followed certain stars at those promotions, like here and there. Again, I'm not like there every week watching the full matches and stuff, but, you know, enough to keep your eye on, enough to still be interested in what they're doing at these other places. Granted, most of them are formerly, you know, Fed boys. They are the likes of Edge and Christian. They are the likes of the Hardy Boyz and whatnot. I was there for Sting's retirement match. Not, you know, necessarily associated with the Fed, but the point is, like, more legacy people than new stars that are created at these promotions. But yeah, AEW, I'm still struggling to break into. I can't lie to you, Michael Hamflett. I saw a clip with 35 million views earlier this week that involved someone going feral, let's say, on another wrestler's limbs that I enjoyed a lot. But apart from that, it's mostly been the TNA stuff. And I quite like where TNA is right now, and this is going to sound so backhanded, but I never used to really dig TNA back when it was more of a competitor, when it had its kind of like that little run where it was not really in competition, but like you said, people like to say that it was
very visible alternative,
alternative. But now I like that it's a bit more ramshackle, a little bit more tin pot, much smaller in terms of the crowds. But there's something about that makes it feel like a real alternative. You know, it makes it feel a little scrappier, I suppose. And I don't know why that works for me. It might all be facade. It might all be narrative. Yeah. But it's kind of got my attention a little bit.
Well, no, I think that's ultimately, like, they'll be thrilled with that. Like, the people within TNA are more than happy. The WWE relationship that exists at the moment, again, like, from history, never ends well for the other company that are getting to bed with WWE. But and this one probably won't. But so far, so good. You can't comment on it without providing that cynical reminder that this is how it tends to go. Yeah. But right now, from an outsider's point of view, but with an analyst hat on, it does feel like WWE, the benefit to WWE here is less about talent or exposure for them and more about the more it can elevate TNA, the more it can create this idea that TNA and AEW are on equal footing.
Right.
Like, they're not. Okay. Like, AEW has just ran its annual All-In event from Dallas with, like, getting up to 40,000 people, I think it was, in Dallas, and it looked even bigger than that. They've just announced they're going to run Wembley Stadium again in 2026, having ran it twice before. It's not even a conversation. Yeah. Like, AEW is the number 2 promotion. It's where it lives, and it's where it, like, should be as well. Like, the Tony Khan used to like the Pepsi to WWE's Coke, the Burger King to its McDonald's. Like, you are not calling yourself a small brand by referring to yourself as Pepsi or Burger King. Right. So, like, AEW fits there and, like, kind of belongs there stylistically as well, because it does better being, like, casting itself as the smaller of the two, being able to push back on the giant, on the monolith. It's far better in that adversarial role, really.
Tony Khan's like, I've got fewer billions than the competition.
Exactly.
You know?
That's and it, like, it is bizarre how that does work as its own little thing. And speaking of working as its own little thing, that's what TNA is. And WWE can kind of position it as this almost this rival to AEW, that it's almost trying to set, like, the rules of the universe. Look, we love competition. For example, you know, there's TNA and nothing else. Like, it's as if they're trying to do that a little bit now with TNA. But I like that your takeaway from a casual observer's point of view is still pretty tin pot, like, because that's probably not what WWE, and I quite like that. Yeah. Like, TNA on its best day still cannot help being TNA. And as somebody that watched it in some of those days in the mid-2000s, I quite like that.
Well, you know what I think is interesting as well is that I love that idea that, they're probably using TNA to build up the idea and the narrative of the official kind of competitor being on par with they who shall not be named, but they constantly get in their own way. Like you mentioned, that cynicism there of, will this eventually go wrong thanks to this partnership? And it's like, again, as an outsider, as someone with only a general understanding of how similar things have gone in the past, like the integration of WCW or whatever back in the day, you know, I look at them constantly bringing out Joe Hendry for that pop and then, like, immediately killing him in like 30 seconds, you know, at their biggest shows. And it's like, on the one hand, it's great that the relationship facilitates these other superstars coming over, puts them on that stage to get those pops. But they are so eager to remind you, oh, our guys are so much better than these guys, by the way, that it kind of doesn't root. I suppose it works in their favor because they are then kind of saying, if TNA is on par with AEW, we kill them every time.
Yeah.
But it's a strange thing to watch unfold because you do kind of have that cynicism and you do understand how this has gone in the past, and you're wondering if those little moments are symptomatic of a wider conclusion to this overall partnership, or if they're just like blips in an otherwise healthy one.
We're a year in, which again is not necessarily always how these things tend to go. And that's not just WWE, that's wrestling in general. Companies, it's one of the many reasons why companies so rarely effectively work together, is because ultimately paranoia and politics and the idea of who gets to win and who gets to, like, not so much in terms of who gets the 1, 2, 3 and the shoulders get pinned, but more which company looks better coming out of it, because even best laid plans. It's not like this podcast, Josh, where like WhatCulture Wrestling and WhatCulture Gaming can perfectly coexist harmoniously. It's like what might start as this nice idea between two promotions quickly becomes one trying to little brother the other, because that's just how wrestling has historically gone. It's the nastier, the cynical side of it, which feels like a thing to move away from as we get into your 7 wrestlers, because there is a romance attached to so much of this.
Absolutely.
Especially for somebody like yourself that has over the years maybe not has been in the weeds or has been as deep with it. And I think that's like, I'm so fascinated to like hear the answers to all of these questions. And I imagine our listeners and viewers will too, because I dare say, so Wilborn has sat down with me and Sige, and I know he's going to be sitting down with various members of the WhatCulture Wrestling team to do this and ask these questions. But naturally, there's going to be a lot of similarities. Like, we're not all in our 30s anymore. That's not cool. It's better to be in your 40s, if anything, I find. But with several of us at like relatively similar ages, or with like maybe even like gaps of maybe sort of 5-6 years, there's going to be a lot of overlap in terms of wrestlers that were influential in lots of periods of time, especially if wrestling has been your thing as it has been for like so many of us. But with gaming being like a central one and there being like a nice sort of a generation gap, I'm looking forward to, I imagine, like you name dropping a bunch of wrestlers that will be far more relatable to some of our younger viewers and listeners than maybe some of the ones that say myself and Sige might have. The first one in the 7 wrestlers thing is the one that made you fall in love with wrestling. You know, rooted in nostalgia, a wrestler from your childhood or your early sort of memories of fandom. But yeah, it's a big one. Like that one face that came on, or heel, that came on the screen that just, for the first time, stopped you from being a person that looked at it and just went, fake garbage that I'll never care about, to, I want to see more of this. Why? Who was that wrestler?
It's a combo. It's the Hardy Boys.
The Hardys.
It's both of them in those tag team matches, because it's exactly what you mentioned there in terms of, I'd seen wrestling before, but I'd seen older wrestling at that point, you know, stuff from probably like the early 80s through to maybe very, very early 90s stuff. But I associated it so much with like uncool dad stuff. And I think
you were looking at me.
I know. There's only one of us who's a dad in this room, is all I'm going to say. There's a daddy over there, but there's a dad right here.
There's only one uncool dad.
Well, as you realize, and as I'll probably get to later on in this list, as you get older, you realize that your dad was kind of right about a lot of stuff. So I have come to embrace that before. But when I was a snot-nosed 10-year-old, you know, just kind of discovering wrestling VHS tapes at car boot sales.
Oh, yeah.
What I would always gravitate towards and what would always get pushed on me were a lot of those TLC compilations, you know, and those tag team compilations that had the Hardy Boys front and center. And I remember seeing them for the first time, and there was something about the look, the overall presentation. At that point, of course, it turned to the Attitude Era, so the entire presentation of wrestling in the WWF.
I know the exact tape you're thinking
completely
of,
different.
Right now. Brown cover with the silver font and the 3 at the end.
Brown cover, absolutely, that exact tape. And I just hadn't seen it like that before. I just bought into it in a much different way. You know, I was associating wrestling with kind of slow, hard men, you know, and that's my own fault for being a dumb 10-year-old, but I hadn't seen this like high-flying stuff. I hadn't seen the use of weapons and household items and the kind of grittiness that was associated with those kinds of matches. And then again, as a child of the era that I was born in, the just look of the Hardy Boys in general. I mean, Jeff Hardy was like the look that I based my entire life on for my entire teen years, right? My entire, from 10 to probably now. Like, I still kind of want to be Jeff Hardy a little bit.
I'll see you in the club giving it all that.
Exactly. I want to have the fishnets. I want to have the jeans. I want to have the shoes. You know what I mean? I want to have the hair.
Very popular creator wrestler template, Jeff Hardy's gear.
Yes.
Because I think we all visualized, I was never one that particularly manifested myself as a wrestler, but even if I had done, it would have been a tops on situation. And the Hardy Boys at least created an aesthetic where like, yeah, they would take them off for like their fans to scream when they took the tops off.
Yeah.
But so much of the look was the whole thing.
Yes.
Wrestlers in clothes hadn't really looked as much like they belonged, I think, until the Hardys were two of the first to really kind of pioneer, especially in WWE, the body territory. Like, the Hardys weren't big guys at their peak, and it didn't matter so much because of the way they dressed and how connected to like youth culture they felt at that time.
Exactly that. You know, I think even though I was never a John Cena fan, there's something about jeans. Apparently, I like jeans in wrestling, right? Because John Cena, after his initial run, like he comes back and he's got the jorts, and there was something about that just kind of felt weirdly and subtly like anti-establishment, what had come before, where I'm like, I don't know why this is working, but the fact that your attire just does not look like what I associate with wrestling, it's working a lot for me, and the Hardys definitely kind of had that as well. And then obviously I just think they were set up with one really good matches, one really good rivals, and just kind of hit at the right time where they were just different enough and kind of like out to prove themselves enough that, it worked for me massively. And I've got a cop-out answer for almost all of these where I'm actually really secretly choosing more than one person. So it was the Hardys that kind of like got me into the idea of wrestling, made me realize this was actually much different to what I was expecting it to be. But the first time I was ever invested in a storyline, because, you know, previously I'd just been watching tapes and just random matches out of context. Yeah. The first time I remember watching week to week and being immediately invested and kind of had my first heartbreak and my first euphoria at a win was Eddie Guerrero's run as champion and getting to that point of winning the belt finally, and like the emotion of that moment and going to hug his family and stuff and just how much it meant to him. I think that was the first time I watched a storyline play out more or less in totality, and then you get the aftermath as well, where I thought, this has actually unlocked another level beyond it just looking cool or like feeling like a spectacle. I'm in it now for the characterization. I'm in it now for the storytelling as much as I am just the explosion of an individual match.
There's definitely something too, even within WWE, like the market leader, the number one in the charts, the biggest box office version of pro wrestling. There is something to finding wrestlers within that look like they're not the company favorite. This was historically a problem with the John Cena and the Roman Reigns. And in my experience as a young fan, it was Hulk Hogan, and just not liking Hulk Hogan is like, you know what, I like more of the kind of your indie guys, like your Ultimate Warriors. Like, they're just as big, just as massive, just as huge, but it was not Hogan. And there was a sense of like having it was okay to like the big bad Fed, but you wanted your own small corner of that. And the Hardys, and then Eddie Guerrero especially speaks. I mean, he was absolutely jacked, but he was a good sort of half a foot shorter than it was Brock Lesnar, who he defeated at No Way Out 2004, the one you're on about. But the idea that an Eddie Guerrero could be WWE champion, I remember how much that meant to me as a fan, because he was still not typical of a top guy choice. And likewise, the Hardy Boys as tag team champions, their first tag title win came at the expense of the Acolytes, through just massive, jacked guys who would bully the likes of us. Yeah. And the Hardys doing it that way, and like to a lesser extent, but with a team like the Dudleys, for example, who again looked like nasty pieces of work, and it was like the Hardys were easy to be baby faces in that regard. Just before we move on, like, I love that Guerrero and Brock example. And maybe that applies better here, but in terms of the Hardy Boys, do you have a specific memory of a match, or like one match in particular? Like, I know the exact tape you're on about, and it was a lot about the splice clips of some very similar outings with the Hardys and the Dudleys. But was there one from the time that like really sticks out, or was it just more?
You know what? There is one, and I'm going to absolutely mangle it, and it's going to make me seem completely fake. But there's this one, and I can't remember if it was like the triple threat with them, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian, or if it was just maybe them and Edge and Christian. But there's one where they kind of go out, and it's like, I think they had the time cut just before, and it's a really kind of quick match, and they had to speed everything up, and it's just like spot after spot after spot after spot. And I wish I had revised enough to give you the exact match that it is. I'm going to remember off camera and then immediately kick myself.
But you know, it's one of several, because that was ultimately what like all three teams made each other and made that division in the process through work like that.
Yeah. And it's not a match, but I'll always remember their return. Like, I think it was probably a decade ago at this point, which is kind of crazy. But when they came back to the Fed after that massive break, and they got that massive pop, and it was like, oh, that was one of many moments around the time where I had to I was so out of it at that point. You know what I mean? I couldn't be more out of wrestling in general. And then suddenly my head was, turning towards everything, and seeing like everything on Twitter like popping off about it. That was magic.
That was incredible. Our producer, Adam Nicholas, were you in attendance for that one, Nick?
I was there live, yeah.
Orlando, Florida, WrestleMania 33.
33.
Oh,
yeah. And obviously they've been elsewhere doing shows.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of speculation about whether they could actually be there or not. And then, and obviously it was Matt Hardy was at the height of his elite as well, which everybody was going crazy for. And then that is probably still to this day the loudest pop I have ever heard live.
Contemporary like WrestleMania moment, really. Capital W, capital M. The Hardys. Matt Hardy had basically booked his own thing, which justified the Hardys going into every territory and winning the titles. It was called the Expedition of Gold, and it all led back. They'd lost the Ring of Honor titles 24 hours earlier, to Nicholas's point, to the Young Bucks. Funnily enough, it all ties together with like the modern landscape of wrestling. And then they return to WWE and win the WWE tag belts on the first night back, and it basically completes the storyline that Matt Hardy had appropriately started in TNA with the Broken Universe. They'd gone, won the belts everywhere, and it was just the most unlikely of conclusions. This like work is going to work, but he had to think in the back of the mind, I wonder if this can get us all the way back. And sure enough,
it kind of feels like they're trying to do that now. I don't know if it's going to work necessarily. You know what? I understand. Like I get where they are now. They are in this weird place where there's a sort of around Matt Hardy, especially. I don't know. I can't speak to Jeff. I know he's been like in and out of all of his personal problems and whatnot. But every time I see an interview with Matt Hardy, it's like he thinks he's still 25 and is deserving of like the top spot in every company that he goes to. And I understand that that's going to piss a lot of people off. There's something about that naivete I really, really like. And I'm like, you know what? If I believed in myself that much, you know, I'd also think I deserve one final run in WWE at the very top, selling out these stadiums. Who am I to say otherwise?
He's not the most subtle in shooting his shot, is Matt. But to sort of to tie this back to what we were talking about the WWE TNA relationship, obviously as of recording, this might have changed by the time we get there. Probably because right now, as we record, the two top singles titles in TNA are held by WWE wrestlers, JC Jane, the women's champion, and Trick Williams, the men's champion.
Sorry, who for the women's champion?
That would be JC Jane.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Where are my manners? But the TNA WWE relationship thus far has seen WWE obviously be the kind of big brother, TNA's little brother, with the exception of the Hardy Boyz, who rocked up in NXT a couple of months back, pinned the NXT Tag Team Champions Fraxium, the celebrated best tag team of 2024, and then left. No rematch, no nothing. So there's your one so far. So Matt's still working his game. Maybe that takes us nicely to our second one. I don't know. You did mention Jeff Hardy at Slammiversary, but your current favourite, obviously this can change with ongoing storylines and events. You've mentioned some of the stuff in 2025 that you've liked or that has alienated you about WWE, AEW and the like. But yeah, when you are dipping in, who would you say is your current favourite wrestler?
So I came back to wrestling for a combination of Cody Rhodes and CM Punk. And I thought they're still my guys to certain extents. I'll still tune in for everything that they're doing, whether their storylines are hot or whether they're not. But I've realized since I've come back and since I've been started watching more, like the MVP for me always is Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins is, I'm starting to think he's my guy. And there's something
These words have never been uttered from that chair in the studio, by the way. You need to understand that.
Don't do it, Josh.
I remember saying this, or maybe broaching the idea of this to Nicholas like a year ago. He was like, he's going to break your heart. He's going to let you down. And he probably will at some point, but he has... I don't know why. To me, he's been so reliable in everything that he's in. And I think it's interesting that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've watched so far, like up until this year, and let me explain this, but he feels like he's not really had a storyline, right? He's been involved in a lot of storylines. To me, it feels like he's been kind of roped in. He's been roped in to facilitate the progression of other wrestlers, and he still had so much to do within that. And then this year, I kind of feel like he was able to break away from that mold a little bit with the stable and winning the Money in the Bank again for the second time. But obviously now he's injured and that's kind of the momentum's kind of died down a little bit. But I find personally that everything that he's in is elevated because he's involved. And I don't know if that's a popular opinion. I don't know if that's a terrible opinion, but it's the one I'm holding right now. I
love hearing this, as I say, when I look in this direction, because normally it's the total opposite. And we will get Adam Nicholas's deeper thoughts on this in just a second as well. I
back this, by the way. We will never be my guy again, but I back this take because we've discussed this before. I'll let you go on then.
Well, I think there is Seth Rollins sort of invites, at this point, because he's been around so long as well, it's like, it's not easy to analyze him as a wrestler, but it almost doesn't feel like the point. It ends up creating this sort of like, I don't know, this spiritual debate almost around like not what you want out of a wrestler, but like what you want out of a person. You mentioned a word there, and it was reliable. And I consider myself a situational Seth fan.
Right.
Because I can't commit to just liking him outright, because sometimes he's awful. Sometimes he just sucks ass, right? And then you do that, and it's like, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to go to bat for Seth Rollins, and then you made a fool out of. If we're analysing wrestling, right? Whether it's like a match or a storyline or this, again, you said it there, this sort of position that he occupies where more he's a facilitator than he is the star himself. It's something he has grappled with, sometimes openly, sometimes like internally, and you can see it kind of like how he maybe lashes out in his way. A very complex modern WWE case study, Seth Rollins. But I value somebody being reliable, and I kind of, it plays to my tastes that a guy that can stick around and be a 7 and very occasionally offer you a 9 or 10, but then sometimes might drop to a 4, is all right by me. Whereas some people kind of only want the 9s and 10s, and it's like, I don't really have the time for the 7s. Yeah. And it is an entertainment form. So I get that too. Like, Sidge is very much like that. He just cannot abide Seth Rollins. There are too many flaws to Seth Rollins' game that he cannot tolerate, and especially not as a top guy.
Yeah.
Put in a position as the gatekeeper, I don't want to speak for Sidge, but I think a lot of people feel like this about Seth Rollins, where it's like, well, as a gatekeeper, I can kind of just ignore him. I don't need to like put my eggs in his basket and he'll just do whatever. When he's the top guy, the tippy top guy, you have to then be along for the ride, whether you want to be or not, because he's going to be in these headline matches or these like long opening segments of Raw, or he becomes the stir that straws the drink rather than somebody. Some people would argue the perfect use of Seth Rollins was as Cody Rhodes number 2 when Cody was finishing the story on WrestleMania 40.
Yeah.
The guy that would be there to literally take the hits as he did at WrestleMania 40. I will be your shield. I will be your partner. He's been a champion, but he can hold that secondary title rather than the proper one. Like that. And everyone occupies different space and occupies different roles. And I would certainly never really argue Seth Rollins to be a Cody Rhodes or a Roman Reigns. Triple H made B+ player like a really dirty word in the 2010s, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being a B+ player, and I would classify Seth Rollins as one of those. I think it's good. I think it should be B+ players, and there should be C's and D's and everything. But it's interesting that you mention him here as your current favourite, because I think that's where I and a lot of people can never truly go balls deep, for the lack of a less gross expression. He will never be my favourite guy, but situational means sometimes I enjoy him. Yeah. Sometimes I'm glad of a Seth Rollins. I think he's like in his bag, in his element as that character, as this kind of like completely over the top, ostentatious fool. I think he's so valuable to a mid-card. And I think the matches can still be there.
Yeah.
Analytically, I don't like how he sells, for example. I find that to be a really big problem. He kind of just drops stuff halfway through sometimes in a way that I find frustrating. But again, it's a personal taste thing. In the bigger picture of it all, I'm glad for Seth Rollins without him ever being my number one guy. If we were roles reversed right now, he would just not qualify for any of these categories. But I'll be like, I'm glad you came. I'm glad you came to the party, but like, oh, you rang last minute and said you couldn't make it. Oh, never mind. Like that's where I sit with Seth.
Paradoxically, I agree with literally everything you just said there. And that's why he's my favorite. There's something about it. Maybe it is that kind of
Mine is the Miz, by the way, in all this.
Is it? Okay.
I'm a Miz guy. Nobody's a Miz guy. Nobody's a Miz. I got something about the Miz.
Yeah.
Bless him. Bless this multi-millionaire that will live 10 better lives than I will. Bless him. Bless him. Hair ruffling the old Miz.
That's you've nailed it there. It's that sort of perception of Seth Rollins that I think I maybe enjoy more than his actual ability or what he's doing, because he's my current favorite. And paradoxically, I don't want to see him get pushed into that Cody Rhodes spot or Roman Reigns spot. I like that he's around those players. I like that he facilitates their stories. I like that he gets time to shine a little bit further on down the card. But similarly, I don't want him to be the face of the company in that way. But I cannot help but have this like undying respect for just how much of a worker he is. Like you mentioned there, it's that element of what's going on outside the company. What's that mix of storyline stuff and what's that mix of reality as a person, as a wrestler, as a performer. And just, maybe it's a little bit reductive, but you see these big stars and they come and they steal the spotlight and they wrestle a couple matches a year and they cut a few promos, and it's like, that's all I need to do, because they are those 9 out of 10s, they are those 10 out of 10s, they will shift tickets, they will shift merch. There's something about Seth kind of when he's fit, you know, like being there week in, week out, holding up the company to a certain extent when those other higher players aren't involved. And then, again, like you mentioned, kind of putting his body on the line to do so and suffering these injuries and going into matches when you can tell he's not 100%, but he's putting on as good of a performance as he can, and then he's getting absolutely battered, and then he's taking 6 weeks off, right? There is something that I appreciate a lot about that, and I think, similar to you, I kind of, ironically, despite being 13 minutes late to this podcast, I do kind of value reliability a lot. And I wonder, like, he's kind of one of those players to me that he's not there and the rest of the company suffers. And he's not even necessarily good enough to make himself that good, but he's got enough ability, he's got enough talent to be almost like the glue that elevates everyone else around him, like I said at the start. And yeah, I have a lot of admiration for that, I suppose. And I think his entrance is impeccable, by the way.
Oh, it's, which as a heel, sort of maybe has to go as well, which is another thing that like he kind of doesn't necessarily want to commit all the way to, because when you're over, and that was something that took him from a level that he was at to one that he'd never been at before, as these weird wrestling things can do sometimes. And it's a bit of a quirk, I guess, of the heel stable that, as of recording, might have gone by the time you're watching or listening to this. Right. He's maintained that, and the sing-along is such a big element of it. And like he's starting to dress down a little bit, but again, you have to walk that back in stages and all that kind of thing. I find this very interesting. Seth Rollins, and there have been others of the time. I would dare say for a generation it was The Undertaker, and I'm not an Undertaker guy, but WWE in particular is the company where I think the more fans are in with that company, the more stability and what it is to be kind of a foundational figure within the company of that era is valued, versus other companies where they just want to see the best. And there's no right or wrong there. But I think certainly within AEW, although maybe less so now with someone like a Hangman Page, but there are company pillars in the elite that they love. But ultimately, I think the AEW fan base at large would rather just have the best of that era. Who is the best? I want to see the best. I want it to feel like this. Elite, it's in the title, right? Ring of Honor, way back in the day, was doing something completely different to WWE and was basically able to argue itself as the wrestlers you will simply not see in WWE, the best ones.
Yeah.
You know, and like, I think in WWE, they've always marketed themselves as liking having these guys that serve the purpose of being able to make sure that the rain won't come in if there are rainier days ahead.
Yeah.
That might not be the best or might not be the biggest stars, right? Like to that point in Nicholas's fandom of Seth Rollins, am I right in this assumption, Nicholas, that he was having his first run as the top guy when you kind of were finding your way back to WWE in the mid-2010s?
He had the briefcase,
yep,
and was obviously doing some of his best wrestling work.
Yes.
Which I wouldn't have known at the time. I was obviously still new to it, but would find out later that it was some of his best work.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like the late 2014, 2015 type thing.
Yeah.
And then obviously have the cash-in that happened at WrestleMania 31. Like, so Josh, imagine now your fandom, your favorite guy who you've just gone into, decides to go and cash in at WrestleMania, which has never been done before, on the first WrestleMania you watch again in like literally years, like 10 years plus. And it was like, well, this is the guy.
Yeah.
How could this not be the guy? Stupid little silly Seth Rollins with his half blonde hair. This is my guy. And he's wrestling kicked ass, and then he got injured. I think the best way to describe him, though, is probably that he's like, Seth is the guy who's more than capable of winning the best supporting actor at the Oscars, who thinks he should be winning the best actor at the Oscars. And it's a shame because he can elevate everybody around him. And you can't argue that he doesn't deserve a position. Unfortunately, the cruel nature of the game is when he gets in that position, it isn't who he's meant to be. So he works his tail off to get there. And then when he's there, it just isn't meant to be. Like, he's just not meant to be the main striker of the football team. He's meant to be the supporting striker at every single level. But he's so good that he's better than The Miz in that regard, like skill-wise.
Yeah.
But he does the same job, only he's like orders of magnitude better than him.
Yeah. And the drive...
And wrestlers love him. And same as The Miz. Wrestlers love working with him because he will help you to achieve the thing that you're supposed to achieve with, like, flying colours.
I think the drive that you mentioned there is what I continue to think. If like Seth Rollins is not somebody that I would consider a particularly fascinating person.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But like that drive that Nicholas mentions to believe that he can win that Best Actor Oscar is often what creates the most fascinating Seth Rollins content.
Yeah.
Because that bloody-minded belief that he should be the top guy is like quite welcoming in something like wrestling, where it is competitive and you can see, of course, people, it's a dance, right? Like in a promo battle between two wrestlers, there's cooperation, and ideally, like you're setting somebody up to get you just as they're hoping for one back from you to be able to get them. That's when it works the best, you know?
Seth stepping up to Punk was the big one.
Perfect. The perfect example, right? Because immediately CM Punk could believably say, like with his smirk, with his kind of signature kind of talking down attitude, no offense, mate, but actually offense intended. You're not on my level. You're nowhere near my level. And Seth's like, you're fucking joking, mate. Like, let me give you the 15 reasons that I've carefully prepared why I'm on your level. And like, he's not wrong in any of those 15 reasons, but like, who wants to back the guy that brought the list?
Yeah.
You know, like that. And that's really interesting because it's like, you kind of start asking different questions of like, well, what is it to be a star? Like, what is CM Punk the guy that can just walk away on a moment's notice and fans still chant his name, that can like talk millions of people into a storyline off a week's notice because he's got that innate connection that so few wrestlers ever forge, and like with it like a delivery style and a quality style that tends to like pay off in the matches? Or like, what's more valuable, that can be done in a moment, or the guy that does put in the work, the guy that makes the towns, the guy, like they both have value, and you've got these two people arguing like it's not an apples and orange thing, but in the moment, in the heat of their battle, they think it is. Like, no, my thing is more valuable. Well, it's not actually. Let me tell you why. And then that's where the tension exists. And every now and then, when he rubs up against that, like he will sit there and earnestly believe, well, no, I don't see why I'm not on Roman Reigns' level, actually. And we can all say, we can see it, Seth. But the fact that he can't is great. Like, that's really good that he can't see that. And I like that about him once in a while when that sort of flashes up again, when he does bare his teeth a bit. You know?
That idea of like trying to figure out like what makes a star, what gives someone that X factor. Takes
it's not fair always, is it?
That's why I love it, man. That's why I love it, because it's not fair. If you compare accolades on paper, if you compare maybe ability, I don't know, on paper, like there's nothing on that paper necessarily separating where the two should be. But you feel if someone's on that extra level, you feel it if they have that aura, for lack of a better term, and can come into a match and by their own appearance, by a look, by one move, you're like, yeah, that's it. That's $1 billion right there. And Seth isn't that. He's $100 million, right? And that's still pretty good, but you'll never be $1 billion. There's like such a major gap there, and there's something about that space I just find fascinating, because it's at a certain point it's beyond your control, and that's frustrating, right? It's frustrating to know that you're good, but you'll never be good enough. And you can't admit that in a way, because then what the hell are you going to do for the rest of your career? What the hell are you going to do for the rest of your life? So you've got to believe that you can be, but you've got to know that you're never going to be, right?
I love that. Like the one, like your current favorite is the $100 million underdog.
I
like that's kind of the space he can occupy.
You know what? I think with some of my other answers and just my personality in general, right? I think this sums it up. When I was a big supporter of Man United back in the day, right? My favourite players were...
Big swing.
I know.
we had swing. Everyone switching off, just no worries.
I'll be quick. My favourite footballers, right, were Michael Carrick and Park Ji-sung.
Right.
Not Rooney, not Cantona, not anyone like that.
I like the little guys in Manchester United.
Yeah, of course. That's what I mean. Like Seth Rollins, they're still part of the biggest company in the world. They're still, like you said, going to live lifestyles 100 million times better than mine. But you've positioned them within this hierarchy as a slight underdog.
Yeah.
And I'm gravitating towards that because they put in the work,
Love that. Smash the machine, Michael Carrick.
Smash the machine, Seth Rollins, who held up this company that you might not have really should have held up for this long.
Oh, it's good stuff, man.
Actually, just before we go, tell them your theory, if you're happy to share it, on Seth's current status.
Well, again, this is sort of, maybe I've been proven an idiot as usual, or right for the first time ever. By the time people are watching or listening to this, depending on when you are. Seth Rollins currently spotted walking around on crutches, pulls up injured in a match that he then goes on to lose in what instantly, for whatever reason, I've watched too much of this, my own good brain was looking at that going, that's a work. That's a work, that. And WWE out front have said he's gone to this like world-renowned surgeon, the guy that's operated on every wrestler, the whole deal. He's going to be out for a long time. Triple H is sat in a press conference saying it's not looking good, and then he's basically persona non grata on television. Paul Heyman is out there saying, we're missing our leader. It's just me and Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed, and I instantly felt that this was an attempt by WWE and Seth Rollins to maybe address that constant problem with him of just being the guy that's next to the guy rather than the guy himself. And they were trying to orchestrate a new kind of work where the mere fact I'm saying the word work to you means that like the old work is dead.
Yeah.
Right. You have to come up with a new work because we're like us on the outside are way too familiar with too much what goes on the inside. It's part of the fun, really. Now it's integrated. WWE have got their show Unreal on Netflix. They're welcoming you in just as much. Different game now. But they've tried, and potentially in vain, but they have tried to like come up with a new work and get it out there that Seth Rollins is legitimately injured, crutches the whole deal, only to make his cash in as impactful as the 2015 one that Nicholas describes. The fact that like, how can you shock the world twice, basically?
Yeah.
And again, depending on when you listen to this, SummerSlam might have aired, and I believed it was to take place at SummerSlam in MetLife Stadium because it's the biggest, the first ever two-night SummerSlam. It's a stadium edition. They're very much trying to make it seem like it belongs in the conversation with WrestleMania as this massive event. And it allows the CM Punk and Gunther characters or the Cody Rhodes and John Cena characters, because they're in the two title matches, to mentally switch off from Seth Rollins being a threat in the storyline. If he's always kicking around with his briefcase, it's quite hard to switch that guy off. But this is the way to do it. And he's actually been willing to take this loss against LA Knight and been willing to appear injured and off the grid in order to completely throw them off. It very tacitly puts over Gunther and Punk and Cena and Cody because when they lose to him, they would have never seen him coming.
Yeah.
I'm
rubbing my greedy hands together about this. I hope so. I think that idea generally that you need to improve works in general, you need to kind of make them more believable now. I don't know about you, but I feel like recently they've at least been trying, not always succeeded. Yeah. I loved what they kind of did with it's a few years old now, but like the CM Punk return by kind of getting out there and kind of seemingly like leaking to some of the reporters that, no, it's definitely not happening anymore. And if you kind of, I don't know, you could still like look into that stuff, I think, and look at what was reliable and what seemed to have been happening to figure it out. But just to get that kind of level of doubt back, I thought was pretty genius.
To that point, two of the most reliable news reporters in the space were straight out with, the Seth Rollins thing is real. It's not a work.
Yeah.
And it was myself and Murray were aggregating it on a Monday off the event taking place on a Saturday, and two of the prominent names who we aggregate the news from every day with as much trust as you can possibly afford.
Yeah.
And as a result, I was kind of saying, I think these two prominent voices are wrong.
Right.
Which again, people don't know. Like, I'm not putting myself over. I just didn't buy it personally. But if they're saying it's a shoot, it's a shoot. And then a couple of other prominent voices were like, we're not so sure, or it could be half a work, or it could be this, or it could be that. So in some respects, it's already been effective.
Yeah.
Because the fact that it's been discussed in these terms is more interesting than a fake cast or the guy outright just say appearing on Twitter absolutely fine and then appearing on Raw hurt. So they've achieved some of the goal.
Yeah.
And speculation on a Money in the Bank briefcase is always part of the fun of the Money in the Bank stipulation. So they've kind of still got that as well. We will see ultimately as the weeks and months progress. Seth Rollins is just not on television between now and then. I'm really sorry. I hope we get what I'm saying there.
You got my hopes up now.
But if the cash-in happens and it gets the reaction that it could do as a result of this little absence, then it's worked. We will see. I don't say this in kind of like, I've got you, you stinking liar. I'm saying it in the form of I'd rather be worked. I'd rather have this fun speculation than simply be like, he's actually hurt, he's actually not.
Exactly.
The grey area is the fun bit.
Yeah, and then whenever he comes back and everyone loves it and they say, Josh, you were right, he's the best and he should be your favourite. So there you go, validation.
And is that what sitting in front of these microphones is all about? I don't know.
He does also have law, doesn't he, at the MetLife, Seth, of course.
He
beat Brock in the opening match at 35, which was the last ever one-night WrestleMania.
It was.
And this would be the first ever two-night SummerSlam.
He likes that kind of stuff to Seth.
He does like
Rollins.
that kind of
stuff. He did. He defeated Brock Lesnar there.
And obviously SummerSlam in general, winning the double belts off John, didn't he?
In the ultimate kind of capper to the Seth Rollins is not the guy, but he kind of stands near the guys. That match opened WrestleMania 35, despite Seth Rollins winning the Royal Rumble, in part because Becky Lynch had earned her way to the main event. But because as a shoot, Brock Lesnar was like, well, if I'm not going on last, I'm not sitting around for 7 hours, we're going on first. And they were told, like, Seth Rollins, I say they were told, Brock decided. Seth Rollins was told, you're not going on second last anymore. You're going on right now. It's daylight. You win the title.
Great.
It was a great match as well.
It was better for it.
Yeah.
But Rollins would have been like, this again. But the whole presentation was way better for Seth going on first, as kind of far away as possible. But yeah, it's Brock wanted to get out of town.
Amazing.
Didn't want to have New York traffic. Number 3. The wrestler that always makes you smile. It's that kind of joy, that almost like unapologetic positivity that you get simply at whether it's the first glance or it's something that they do in particular.
No matter what character he's playing, Mick Foley.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about that guy. He reminds me a lot, and this is going to do a disservice to his talent and to his training, because I know, obviously, he's put in so much graft. He's put in so much training to, obviously, get where he was and then prove himself and whatnot. So bear with me when I say that he reminds me of Killer Bob from Twin Peaks, right?
Right.
And if you don't know the law about Killer Bob
I would give you that,
from Twin Peaks, that he was essentially a happy accident. The character was always going to be in the show, but it was an issue where in the final shot where he was teased, one of the crew members was just caught on camera, this guy called Frank Silver, and David Lynch, the director, kind of took one look at him with his like long hair and sort of menacing look and denim jacket and said, I think you can be Killer Bob. And then he comes on and he gives like a performance like you never expect a non-actor at that point.
Is it something to do with how like you'd never seen somebody that looked so gleefully happy, looked so evil,
but looks so evil,
and then that plays out in Twin Peaks.
Exactly. Apparently, he was a really nice guy in real life. But I get a similar vibe from Mick Foley. He's obviously not just turned up out of nowhere, but he kind of has that unpredictability about him in all of his matches. Where every time I see him, even when I know how the match is going to go, I think like, What are you up to, Mick? What are you going to do next, Mick? I don't know if you should be doing that, Mick, but I'm enjoying the way that you're working out here. And admittedly, I don't really know too much about the Dude Love character, but as Cactus Jack and as Mankind, like I've really come to love those characters and enjoyed them back in the day. And even though I've heard some rumors that he's apparently a bit of a hard ass off camera when he's like in real life, but when I see him talk about wrestling, I just, there's like a passion there and there's like a drive there to literally put your body on the line as well, but to also entertain and come up with these like interesting gimmicks and to really commit to that on more than just one level, more than just being weird, more than just being like a daredevil, right? But being legitimately entertaining alongside that when you're not just there to take bumps. There's something about that entire package, and also, it helps that he doesn't have the necessary like sort of like The Rock physique, the top guy in WWE physique, I suppose, for lack of a better term, and it all just kind of comes together to create like a ball of chaos that I love watching on screen. He's
one of to his real life persona. He's considered one of the more gentle figures, though with not like a small amount of obviously cynicism that you get, I think, from being in the industry for quite a long time, and cynical, I think, to some of its ills, which is reasonable because there's plenty of them in wrestling, and he's kind of seen a lot of them firsthand. An endlessly fascinating figure that is not underrated in any respect, is widely and loudly celebrated as one of the greatest of all times, and yet still it's probably not loud enough from some of the people that should be louder. I'm talking of Triple H. Like, Foley was a star maker, was a career maker. He didn't make The Undertaker, but he saved The Undertaker when they first feuded in 1996, and the whole point was The Undertaker would face a monster of the week, and it was a formula that was long past its sell-by date, but there was kind of no other way they knew to book The Undertaker, and the original version of the Mankind character was a monster, but he was so much more than a monster of the week, and their rivalry transformed and ultimately kind of created this pivot point in The Undertaker's lore that sent him off in a direction he desperately needed to go, and with it, like, brought out a working style in him that I don't want to say lazy's not the word, because he was still in his like physical athletic prime, but the character required him to draw a lot back. And then this Mankind character brought so much more out of him that he was able to become more of a human figure right when he needed to. Like the kind of cartoon Magic Space zombie was becoming a bit passé, and Triple H simply does not get over as a main eventer without Mick Foley, and I don't mind saying that because Triple H doesn't enough. Right, that's like the evidence is there. Right, for like a 6-month period, they had tried with Triple H to get him over as this guy, but he was out front. In his defense, as a heel, he was out front there with the two baby faces, The Rock and Steve Austin. Like, it has never and maybe will never happen again that you get two number one guys at the same time. And Triple H was the heel foil to both of those, but both baby faces were so incredibly over that they couldn't have been the guys to do it for him. It was just like, oh yeah, they're out there. What a bastard who I just want my favorite baby face to destroy.
Right.
Like, Austin never really saw it in him, and his instincts were typically very good, so he didn't even want to put him over. That was where Mankind, they had a match where it was supposed to be Austin and Triple H for the belt. Austin didn't want to put Triple H over.
Really? Oh,
so
okay.
Triple H's first title win. So who steps in to make it a triple threat? Mankind. Austin will lay down for Mankind, and then the next night on Raw, Mankind lays down for Triple H. You know, that kind of thing happened. The Rock tried and tried and tried again with Triple H, but people just like The Rock too much. And there was a lot of competitive rivalry between those two anyway, and still is to this day. So Mankind was the guy for Triple H. And then again, for Randy Orton.
Yes.
To many people,
yes.
Randy Orton's, here we are in 2025. I've only just started to like Randy Orton now, truthfully, but his best ever match was 2004 against Mick Foley. Edge was kind of the last guy to get that. It became a template. So the kind of, you've got slight diminished returns of like exactly what Foley could do for you, from The Undertaker to Triple H to Randy Orton to Edge.
Right.
But Edge himself would, again,
I think Randy Orton was the last one that I kind of saw him feud with and like kind of get over in that way. So I'm interested about what happened with Edge.
It's over a lip, ultimately. I think there's like, there's Edge had done it in like not the most favourable circumstances when he was revealed to be having an affair with Lita behind Matt Hardy's back. But it was, wrestling's weird, it was the thing that got him to that kind of next point.
Yeah.
But wrestling Mick Foley like fighting him at his own game. He spears him through a flaming table at WrestleMania 22 in one of the highlight spots of that entire WrestleMania. And Mick Foley still had just endless credit in the bank that Edge had done that to him, and Edge had like got down and got dirty on his level, that it kind of completed the package of the Rated R Superstar. He was a nasty piece of work. He was a shagger that would like turn on his best mate for glory. And now he could also fight and get really down in the muck with a Mick Foley. And Mick Foley was starting to age out at this point. So it was like, not only can you wrestle Mick Foley's style, but you're prepared to be that cruel to like this Santa Claus-like figure who happens to put on the flannel jacket and bleed every now and then. So Foley was like such a vital figure in so many other people's careers, that it's rare that being a guy that put other guys over can be such a towering legacy. But in Mick Foley's case, it's a championship belt of its own kind. That like there simply isn't X, Y, and Z without like Mick Foley. His legacy is assured long after he's gone. And that's before we even get to, you know, the Hell in a Cell spot against The Undertaker is one of the most famous things that's ever happened. Like, it's 2 years removed from their actual rivalry.
Right,
but
okay.
It's what people will think about when you say The Undertaker and Mankind.
Definitely.
It's the one time when I was as into wrestling as I was, watching it all the time, there was never not wrestling on a screen if I was near it as a kid. And it was the single time that my mum saw it and said, I'm not sure you should be watching this.
Right.
Because the visual was so beyond the pale. And you watch it back now, like what a
even now it's
stuntman quality fall, like the way he controls
brilliant.
his body to such a small like thing to aim at. But it not lost a slither of its impact.
No,
you
definitely not. No, absolutely not.
I will watch this when we go back downstairs because we've talked about it. It's amazing.
I like the amount of times that I have been in my front room on YouTube and my partner's walked in and I'm watching some kind of analysis or breakdown of that Hell in a Cell match. Yeah. And it's just Mick Foley in a multiple different... from
the accidental one through the roof. And the tooth in his nose.
Just talking about it. And I've heard the stories a million times before. I've seen the footage a million times before. And I'll watch another one if it comes up. You know what I mean? Of course I'm going to watch that. Of course
it's not real, is
it? Nah.
It's not what real human bodies should do.
Exactly. It's just in awe at it, like the post-match footage and stuff. One that I do always think about as well, though, and I don't actually know too much about the storyline itself, but it's that match between Mick Foley, I'm pretty sure, as Mankind, versus The Rock, where he gets his arms tied behind his back, and then Rock just goes to town on him with the chair. And I was as a kid, loved The Rock, could do no wrong, even as a bad guy.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that, thinking like, you bastard. You bam. You know what I mean? I'm going to kill you now. You have made me hate you so much. And as far as I'm aware, a lot of that stuff wasn't necessarily planned to go down as it did, at least in terms of how hurt Mick Foley got in the match.
3 chair shots they agreed on, I think, and Dwayne got a bit overexcited, and I think it ended on 11, I think.
Something
and
absolutely
obviously you couldn't
outrageous.
get hands up for any of them, so it was the most violent version of a chair shot. And
Foley,
Foley has like he's wrote about it in his books, and it's all water under the bridge now, obviously between the two of them for what they'd go on to do together. But complex relationship with that match, I think, because he understood how. A bit like getting thrown off the cell, like what that can do for someone's legacy as somebody that can take that amount of punishment. That does fit in with the Mankind character. Yeah. Like I bet sometimes he wished that like the thing that fit in with his character was raising his eyebrow rather than taking brutal punishment. You know, it's not fair, is it? It's not fair. Like Usain Bolt run 100 meters versus somebody that runs marathons, ultra marathons, for example. Yeah. But the Rock kind of going into business for himself in the heat of the moment. It's obviously an ultimate no-no, but even Mick Foley, the performer, can understand sometimes like the mood strikes or sometimes it feels right, and he understand. What I think bothered him at the time was that The Rock didn't kind of come in and check on him and like just own it and say, it got the better of me, I'm really sorry. We made magic out of there. Yeah. Young Josh Brown wants to kill me. That's going to earn us some money, but I shouldn't have done it. I took liberties and I apologise. The fact that conversation didn't happen in the immediate aftermath, I think, sat with Mick Foley for a long time.
I bet, yeah.
And like ultimately, all things were fine in the end.
There's something that makes me really like genuinely like angry and upset when I watch that match because of that reason. Because Mick Foley is the guy who's like willing to take those bumps. He's willing to kind of go already above and beyond what anyone else would do to get you over. So when you then take the piss and then you then take that for granted, it's like there's something about that on like a personal level that really gets the blood hot. Absolutely,
yeah. And it's unfortunate that it is Foley because that sympathetic manner that he's got like sort of enhances the brutality as well. So it's like there aren't many people that could like if he's doing that to Stone Cold Steve Austin, well, Stone Cold's probably using his stroke to get the Rock depushed / fired. That's like a liberty that you simply do not take. But Mick Foley's that guy like, yeah, well, that thing that you did that was like a gross negligence in wrestling terms was better for us both. Thanks, Rock. Like it was kind of like a worse than best case scenario in equal measure.
Yeah.
Wrestling's weird, but yeah, a great one. Like that match, I struggle to watch that in the wake of what happened to so many wrestlers. It doesn't. It ages like magnificently as like an exhibition of grisly horror movie wrestling violence.
Yeah.
Not so much in terms of the older you get and what we would come to learn about CTE. Not that you were ever going, getting smashed in the face with the chair is really good, but especially when head injuries became such a talking point across all forms of sports and athleticism. You couldn't, shouldn't, and wouldn't do that now, and good.
Absolutely. Like, I think especially, I mean, for me, when you're younger and you don't know as much, you see all those chair shots that were happening, like, more or less week in, week out, like, straight to the head, sometimes back of the head, whatever. And you think, well, that must be fine because they're doing it.
Exactly,
and this is a big company. And then, obviously, as more stuff comes out, as what you've mentioned there, other wrestlers and the consequences of that become more and more apparent. That moment is more and more horrifying every single time. Like you see it on like that real life visceral level. And it's just, it's not a match that I'm going to sit down and go, hey, this is the best wrestling match you'll ever see. But there's like that element of, I've taken this punishment for you and I actually don't think you appreciate it as much as you should. There's something to the core of that resonates a little bit.
Yeah, films guy. Have you seen Beyond the Mat?
Yes.
So there's an accompaniment to that match as well with his kids in attendance. It's like all the matches they could have thought to profile for the example they were trying to set of Mick Foley's brutality.
Yeah.
It's perfect for it, but equally it's a very tough watch. As I found as a dad, I kind of really struggle with it because you're taking your kids in the crowd to see you at work.
Yeah.
That's what's happened at work that day.
Yeah.
To sort of move into sort of nicer climes, I guess, your comfort wrestler. So whether it's security, familiarity, there's something that you've just had from the very beginning, maybe, perhaps, whatever it is, just that it's a comfort food of a performer, I guess.
You know what? He was never like my outright favorite, but he's a wrestler that I'll still put on now and always enjoyed when he was around. Shawn Michaels.
Yes.
Shawn Michaels.
I think I went for him in mine as well.
Did you really?
Specifically 90s pills, Shawn, I need to point out. Absolutely riddled by his demons.
Scared me a bit.
But when the lights came on.
Yeah.
Yes, the way that man moves.
That's it. And
glides across the ring.
Straddling those like different eras, I guess. Like, the pre-reform and the post, I don't know if it worked.
They're different Shawns. They are different Shawns.
Completely different Shawns. And indulging in both is kind of a joy to get like, not just different shades of a wrestler, but different shades of a company as it's progressed, as the years and decades have gone on. I think all with the exception of that crapshoot of a show in Saudi Arabia a few years ago. I think I've never watched a Shawn Michaels match that I haven't enjoyed.
Yeah.
Even like in the case of the one with Hulk Hogan when he's purposely trying to ruin it, he still manages to make it
funny,
top entertainment. You know what I mean?
That ages very well as well, all things considered.
Yes, exactly right.
And this was the reformed Shawn Michaels who was
he still had it in him.
Yeah.
He's like, he tried to push it down, but then every now and then somebody bring out, I want to be the biggest in the world.
Honestly, I'm not a bastard anymore. Or maybe I am a bastard.
It's similar, like his matches with The Undertaker later on, like towards the end of The Undertaker's run. Like, I always enjoyed The Undertaker as a presence, but his wrestling style, for whatever reason, never really did it for me. But when he was in those matches, those big matches with Shawn Michaels, it was like seeing someone else in it. Again, that sort of Seth Rollins. I'm comparing it to Seth Rollins. That thing of like, I'm just going to make you look really good.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to do it in a way because I'm great, but I'm going to bring out the best in you. I think he had that with a lot of people, specifically The Undertaker, but like, I never watched a match there where I didn't think like, this is magic.
Were you watching for the second Undertaker match? It's obviously the build to Shawn Michaels' retirement, and that's my favourite Royal Rumble. The one-night story, because Undertaker's got the belt at the time, so the idea is, well, I can't get the match any other way. I guess I'm going to have to win the friggin' Rumble again. I haven't done this since the 90s. And there's the one-man story that he tells through the Rumble right through to the elimination.
Unreal,
when he's just it's not tipped over the top, it's just pushed.
Yeah.
And like he's staring at his hands as a cliche now, but in that moment, like, what? Like the gradual meltdown that occurs to the point he's eliminated Triple H. He's taken every possible measure to win this match, and it still doesn't happen for him.
Yeah.
Like there was a point of Shawn that I don't rate I love it. I love it. I love Shawn Michaels full stops, his work. The 2000s run, I don't love it as much as I love 90s Shawn.
Right.
They're different. There's so much of similarity because it's the same guy, but there's just a difference to it. Is like his vibe, his energy. The Hulk Hogan point, like there's just, I need the glint in the eye of being a total bastard. I've come to realize I enjoy difficult men in wrestling.
Of course.
Like I think I look for a bit of toxicity in my faves, and Shawn has that in spades in the 90s, less so in the 2000s. But like hindsight has shown, and I think we knew it a bit then, just how barren WWE was for talent on Shawn's level, to the point where it needed him more than he needed it. The fact that this guy was basically having a second career coming out of what was seen to be career-ending retirement. I mean, he was relatively young for today's ages, but when you've had 4 years off with a broken back, it's safe to assume you might never work again. So it kind of ages him beyond his actual number. Like he's just turned 60 here in 2025. So to do fast maths, he was only 40 when he was bumping around for Hogan.
Right.
There's wrestlers, CM Punk is 46 now.
Yeah.
So like he's still a relatively young guy but by then, because of a 4-year back absence and an entire first chapter of his career, you were like, God, Shawn and Hogan are kind of the same in a way.
Right.
He was seen as like an elder statesman. And yet the elder statesman was working circles around the talent of the day. Like it badly missed a shot. Shawn Michaels leaving left an enormous hole that wasn't probably filled until you hit that like Seth Rollins. There are other examples, but they're just more of like a super worker era that came in that had watched Shawn and wanting to be as good as Shawn. The kind of jacked, bland muscle guys that were kind of more wanting to aspire to be a Batista and a John Cena, who were very good versions of the bland jack muscle guys, but there was a lot of rubbish pretenders in their shadow. Like that was kind of all we had left when Shawn retired in 2010, and it was a long time before that gulf was filled. He provided more than he might have appeared to have done in that second run, as like he's still the best. He's actually still like he should be a guy that is like a special attraction guy, and he's like wrestling circles around his contemporaries.
Yeah, that's what used to impress me so much, because there were a bunch of admittedly older wrestlers like still in the business at the time where I just kind of thought like, why are you around? You are washed. Get out. I don't want to see Ric Flair ever, you know? But every time Shawn Michaels was in the ring, even though he visibly at that point probably looked even older than he actually was, like you said, to your
Flair his best matches.
They're absolutely unbelievable. Yeah. And he's working rings around some of the younger talent that, as a younger person, I was supposed to gravitate towards. And I never, for once, kind of even, I think this is the biggest compliment I can give him, I never once saw him as a legacy figure, partly because I wasn't around when he was doing his stuff in the 90s. So I was introduced to him through that second stage of his career, but it never felt like he was being brought out as that special attraction, as someone who is like almost bigger than the company or whatever. It just felt like he was a worker like everyone else, and he was better than everyone else despite being a little bit older. And you definitely kind of saw that in all of his matches, and kind of, I think, especially during that era as well, because he was from the like being so big in the 90s, he had a little bit of kind of grit to him that a lot of the wrestlers at the time also didn't have. And I think that really played in his favor to attract me as something different, like you said, from the more generic muscle men of the time that were getting pushed.
They simply hadn't lived the 20 lives he had in the first. Yeah, that does bring something else, doesn't it? It does. So as your comfort wrestler, the weather's crap outside today. You head home, you soak through, and you get some massive bag of crisps, and you sit down and you type Shawn Michaels into Netflix or YouTube. What match or moment or particular thing of Shawn Michaels are you going to for that comfort viewing tonight?
You're not going to like it. It's the Hogan match. I just love it. I think it's so funny. I think it's so great. And I know, as a Hulk Hogan disliker, not that he's got many fans, you know what I mean? Yeah. To see him stitched up kind of in that way with the meta element of what was going on with the business at the time, like I find that so fun. It's obviously not the most euphoric Shawn Michaels moment. It's probably not one he's necessarily proud of, but
I bet he is.
He can't say it out loud, but I think he is too. Yeah,
But if it's what I'm going to, and I'm just putting it on, and I want to laugh and I want to be entertained, that's probably what I'm going to go to. If not, if I'm wanting like actual wrestling, probably maybe the second Undertaker one, because that's also quite magic. Yeah.
We should probably also clarify for people who don't know, if you are familiar with Josh Brown, and this won't matter, but if you aren't familiar with Josh Brown, Josh's favorite thing in wrestling is when it all goes wrong and there's massive drama behind the scenes. If there's a story about something that's terrible that then leads to a match that is good or bad, that's Josh's favorite thing. He spent ages asking me and Hamflett for a list of, show me some matches where this stuff happened and maybe there was a bit of needle in the background.
It's true that what got me, no, I keep saying this is what got me back into wrestling, but I was just always fascinated with that blend, the kayfabe thing. Like, is this reality? Is this not reality? Like, what does it work? What's a shoot? Like, what's going on here? And just like watching a match like that is absolute putty in my hands. But recently, right, to that point, like I've mentioned to you before, and I wasn't necessarily going to say it on this podcast because I think it eliminates kind of all credibility. The actual wrestling part of wrestling, right, is the thing that I struggled the most with, and it's because I don't have the capacity necessarily to know what's good and what's bad beyond a general feeling, right? So, and I don't know whether I'm good for doing this, but I've been kind of wanting to crack that in a way where I can appreciate matches that aren't just like 9 out of 10s. And I've been going back to a lot of Shawn Michaels matches. I went when it was the Elimination Chamber last year, going back to like that first Elimination Chamber and stuff, and a bunch of his others. And I've been trying to figure out, because he works for me. He works for me in the way that he sells. He works for me in the way that he performs, in the way that he tells a story in the match. And I've been trying to use him to figure out like what is it that I'm connecting to with when it comes to the physicality.
He connected to one of the best pro wrestlers of all time. That's
exactly. That's it, right?
And clearly the colour palette of his tights as well.
That's also true. Yeah, and his theme song is great. Yeah,
I was more referring to the brown ones he's wearing.
Oh, very nice.
He's got tights that match your t-shirt as well.
Thanks for spelling that out for us, mate.
Thank
you. You wasn't quite getting it there.
I'm not. Some of these high level references don't quite work on me.
I am sometimes given a bit of stick for this, a take that is not too dissimilar to yours, actually. Wrestling is extremely important to me. That it kind of goes without saying, I think,
that's a surprise.
In my capacity in this job, but I understand why you would feel as like it not being your regular vocation that you would feel like you need to justify. I don't think you do. Some would. I don't think you do. I am a big believer in wrestling's range. There's this idea that, and there's no right answer, by the way, because we're all dealing with taste, aren't we? But like, there's this idea that, and it's WWE primarily, that what WWE does isn't wrestling, and it's rooted in like Vince McMahon's historic distaste for wrestling as a medium and how he wanted it to be something else other than what it was, and how that was alienating to fans of people that like the boots and trunks element of it the most. Yeah. And that's fine, by the way, because I often do. I like the match the most sometimes, but sometimes I like the aesthetics the most. Sometimes I like the entrances, the presentation, the visual element the most, the video packages, as well produced as they often are, the most. It can be all, ideally. Like WrestleMania should give me all of it.
Yeah.
Like every show should give me all of it. Most don't. We sit here and we kind of pick it apart weekly. Promos. Like what was once a guy on a podium speaking to a guy with a microphone, which was my entry point into wrestling promos, then became dueling promos in the ring and whatever. So the thing always evolves and the thing always changes. but that can often be the best bit, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I can have the fondest memories of a program that was underpinned more by its promos than its payoff. What you want is all of it.
Yeah.
What you want is all of it, you know. Best Match Ever, a series that you can check out that myself and Sige did, typically finds us getting into the weeds of the match after we've done a recap that almost goes as long as how we've gotten there. And that was never by design, but it does remind you that for your emotions to be peaking at the exact right moment of the match, you probably had to be in this longer than when the bell rang.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
you probably had, whether because you've tracked that wrestler's career or you found the things that you love about that wrestler, or whether it's just a specific storyline and you've loved them coming together in the weeks and the months that's got you to that point.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything revelatory here, by the way, and that's why I don't want you to kind of feel bad for not nothing I'm saying is this like brand new hot take.
Yeah.
Like most people will tell you that, yes, people might favor certain elements of pro wrestling, but it's when it all comes together, all of it, when it achieves perfection is an example of when all of it has come together, every single bit. And I would even go as far as to say to the gear that the wrestler is wearing. To the attire they pick. A lot of people don't care. I would include that. I'd be like, if everything is perfect, and then also the attire is good, we're sort of this can never be topped. You know, like we very recently experienced an AEW one in which virtually a year-long story has been paid off, which is the culmination of the death of the Death Riders, a vicious heel act, defeated ultimately their world champion, dethroned by Hangman Page, long considered the main character of AEW, and a guy that has been in his own kind of awful 2-year story with Swerve Strickland, which has involved Swerve Strickland performing a home invasion into his child's bedroom and Hangman Page burning the guy's house down in response. That reduces it, but it's been a really, really well-told 2-year story that overlapped with this title match featuring Hangman Page and Jon Moxley. Perfect on its own terms in every single regard. And then, and me and Nicholas were DMing as this happens, for the first time in a career, the cowboy, the man who always wears black, switches the palette and comes out in white.
Right.
For the night that he's going to be stained in the villain's blood, and has finally donned the very literal white hat as the good guy the company desperately needs to be its champion.
Yes.
In time with changing back to his old theme music and his old attire and like an old look. He was walking around with a villainous mustache and then reverted to his old beard, and it was like the full culmination of the aesthetics.
Yeah.
That's the stuff.
It would have been perfect without that. They've gone beyond perfection with it, and that's what wrestling can do.
Yeah.
And
and his go-to jacket. I'll kill myself if I forget to say his go-to jacket. So
Now, so to your point about like, am I really allowed to say this? If that match is a total Turkerino on the night, it damages it. Mm-hmm. It does, because all of this other work has been done. That then the pressure falls on the wrestlers to get it right on the night. So the wrestling is vital to wrestling. Yeah. It is, but I think, for yourself and for a lot of people that maybe treat wrestling as more of a casual engagement, you shouldn't have the knives to the throat meme if you just say, I'm not always asked when the bell rings.
Yeah.
But the best ones make you asked.
Yes.
Shawn Michaels makes you asked. Mick Foley makes you asked. The Hardy Boyz, whatever it is, they're the ones that can get you and pull you further from there. I'm skimming. I'll watch these. And then on we go to the next one. That's the difference.
Exactly. Absolutely. Like, when it's all firing off and you care about it, it's like the best thing ever, right? And it's funny when I'm going to shoot on AEW's Scott Tailford here for a second, because Scott's always trying to sell me on AEW, and he's like, if you just watch one of these matches, like, I think you'll be sold on it. And I've tried, and he's sent me clips of like these huge acrobatic spots that are like so perfectly done, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, but that's not going to get me in, right?
In the way that it has him.
In the way that it has you, and it will for a lot of people. They'll be able to see that and go, that's unbelievable. Like, I need to see what else is around this thing because I'm so enjoying this spectacle. It's happening in the ring. But it was funny because I didn't watch the full match, but I saw the finish to the Jon Moxley thing where he's getting like choked out.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, if Scott had showed me that, which was sold so well and was so emotional in the moment, it felt like a real character moment and a culmination of a story. I was like, that's sick. I need to know more. And I think it's interesting that then you can work backwards from it. And it's interesting that I could watch, I'm not going to shoot at anyone specifically, but you can watch like people at the peak of their physicality, right? But if it's not necessarily conveying an interesting story to me or something that has a little bit more to it, it's not necessarily something I'm going to gravitate towards, because I need that extra element to really get invested in a way where I think of it as emotionally engaging, I suppose. Yeah.
No, I mean, Shawn Michaels is a booker these days of NXT, and I wouldn't necessarily send you down that path entirely for that.
Yeah.
But as a wrestler, there were few better at that, whether it be for the single issue match or for the long story or whatever. He kind of had it all. Yeah. He was a 10 in most categories in that regard, you know. The one you missed the most, so it doesn't have to be like a morbid thing, like somebody that's maybe passed away. It could be through injury, it could be through retirement, or it could be through your own sort of experience as a fan, and they're there and then they're not, because that's how wrestling works sometimes.
Batista.
Nice.
And more so because of him as a person and everything else he's done, as opposed to an in-ring performer. I still really liked him in-ring and as a character back in the day, but I kind of, even though I know that reputationally his return in, I think it was 2018,
yeah, 2018, and then he had his final match in 2019,
right? Okay,
as a heel against Triple H.
Yes, yeah, like that sort of like year period, I suppose. I sometimes kick myself that I didn't go back for it, because even though it might not have been the return that everyone was wanting it to be, and it might have detracted from other stuff going on at the time.
The story was good. You'd like the story. Watch a highlight video of the match. Don't watch the full match.
I'll do that.
But the
video
started off well, didn't it?
There's a particular segment with Ric Flair that was one of the best things WWE produced that year.
Really
worth checking out. You'll love it.
I'll check that bit out, because I missed it entirely, and I was like, just really gutted that I missed that chance, and it doesn't look like he'll do anything again for the company, because he's getting a little bit old. But I love Batista as a guy when he's talking about wrestling. I love the way that he approaches the industry as someone who was in it for a good amount of time, but is now, at least in the mainstream, I suppose, as much associated with film and whatnot as anything else.
He's done it. He's made the jump. Yeah,
he's successfully made that jump at this point, but when he talks about wrestling, there's still that like fondness, there's still that passion, there's still that like storytelling ability that I think a lot of wrestlers and former wrestlers have, where once they start speaking about the business, you're kind of enraptured and you're like, well, I need to know about the inner workings of this. But I just think he's a great, intelligent dude and a genuinely great actor. And I wonder what he could have done, like performance-wise, if he was given a little bit more to work with.
Well, he started late. It might not look it, but he started late. He was kind of 30s-ish as he was really hitting his peak. And obviously anybody would, kind of start to break down to a certain extent in something as physically demanding as wrestling, but especially a body like his. His book is very interesting. It kind of only catches him in the mid-2000s, but he's lived, another guy that's like lived 10 lives really before he found wrestling. Yeah. So he's a very fascinating figure. And a good egg, broadly. And I think that speaks to his, not just his opinions on things and social issues and the like, which again differ a lot from the type of people that get into wrestling. But I think what has ultimately informed so much of his Hollywood success, I know less than you on this kind of thing, but I know that he's praised for his choices. Not just as an actor in the films, but the films he chooses. I know that he's praised for not necessarily having the route one approach to this second life as an actor. And I think to be not bitter about like what has and hasn't worked about his past, and about just nothing but love for wrestling and nothing but love for like it's life, right? You have your wins and your losses in everything you do. Yeah. And the ability to be pragmatic about that is not something, that you expect out of grizzled wrestlers. But, and maybe this is just me, but I don't expect pragmatism from some of the people that have at various points looked like that. Yeah. Like have looked like such, like, he was Drax and the only prosthetics he needed was the bald cap. Do you know what I mean? Like, people like that, it's not fair. It's a stereotype. And I know this because I spend time often with Simon Miller when we have our trips, and he's jacked out the ace and he couldn't be more like level-headed. But you look at, say, like prime 2005 Batista, and you never imagine you would like sit and have such a measured, quiet debrief with the man, and that's who he is.
That's it, right? That sort of that kind of, it's not soft-spokenness, but it's thoughtful, and it's he's got like a humble nature about him. Like, I love it when he's talking in interviews about that late start that he had, and he's like, I didn't know if this was going to work at all. I didn't know if I was going to drag the company down. Like that kind of self-doubt.
I think he was a granddad when he was the world champion.
Was he?
He had a young kid he had like a young kid or a stepkid that had a kid.
See,
so it's like there's Granddad Batista, the world heavyweight champion, that's got muscles on muscles. It's like, what a unique fella, you know?
Exactly. Like that's the crazy thing. And you talked about there, like his choices in the movie world and stuff, like his work on Dune and his wider work with the director Denis Villeneuve, like he's talked again about how he kind of like got that role and got that relationship, and coming from a place of I really want to do this, but I don't think I'm good enough. But being able to identify like what's a good decision, what's a bad decision. It's maybe reductive to then shoot on The Rock, but he's the closest comparison in terms of someone who's made that jump to Hollywood. You know, like John Cena's getting there, but The Rock kind of has no element of self-awareness or like humbleness about him, and he'll walk into a franchise and go, "This is mine now. You should give me $200 million to make this movie because I'm Dwayne Johnson and I'm a box office draw and I've got talent out the ass." Whereas that has resulted in worse...
Put down your piss bottle, guy. Dwayne's here.
Yeah, exactly. That's resulted in worse choices overall. Maybe not from a monetary value, but in terms of an artistic value, than like Dave Bautista, who you take one look at him and you hear him talk, both about wrestling, both about acting. You're like, this is a guy ultimately that, despite talents either way or limitations either way, like really cares about the craft first and foremost.
Yeah.
And I wish I got to appreciate that with his wrestling career more than I did at the time.
It's a nice way of missing somebody, isn't it? Rather than, say, for example, them passing away or like not losing their prime years to injury or whatever. And I think and wrestling didn't have this, I think, until they realized, WWE primarily realized just how much it could be monetized. Wrestling always had in the 90s, especially, a really complex relationship with its past, because talent would move, as was the nature of the beast, but then they wouldn't be featured in, say, replays. And WWE in particular had this very strict kind of rule about once somebody was gone, they were gone. Don't show them this old clip of this old wrestler, because then the idiot fans will want to see the old wrestler and not see our new guys. It wasn't necessarily true, but that was just this in-house belief, I guess. So the way they produced their new talent was always, new is always better, more is always more. Forget about those old guys. They're fossils from 6 months ago, because like now the new guys, new is new, you know? And certainly as a kid, I remember buying into that and buying into this idea that if a wrestler rocked up down in WCW, it was like, oh, that's retirement home. I've got a wrestling plumber now that is better. It wasn't, but you know, like that's how they were. In the post I guess the Monopoly era, the death of WCW and the acquisition of WCW for nothing really, relatively speaking. Like I think it was something around $3 million they paid for it, which if you consider what they got out of that, like an entire roster of wrestlers plus an entire archive of like X number of years of footage and trademarks and things that they could just use at will. That was when they realized just how much history could be monetized and history could be relived, and that it did in fact add value to a wrestling fan's experience. It added a wholeness to the, like, how did I watch wrestling? I didn't have Sky, so I would get a tape and then I would get another tape, and it wouldn't necessarily be the next month's tape. It could be a tape from 5 years ago, but I just wanted more. I wanted as much of it as I can. I wanted to fill in the gaps and all that. And they understood that people could do that. And now you can go on Netflix and there's like, I would never imagine the day that like one button on Netflix opens up decades of TV shows, but that's what it does. And Batista's a nice guy to miss in that regard, because it's all there. It's all there waiting for you. Everything he did. Like, there's nothing missing from the Batista collection, you know? There's like you don't need to maybe watch some of the lows. You can just treat yourself to the highs. You know, like a classic storyline with Triple H, for example, from his rise, just as one example. It's all there. It's all there for you to enjoy, watching him develop. And it's a nice thing from wrestlers that came through in that era versus the ones that had to wait a lot longer for their footage to be lionized.
That's an interesting like sort of distinction between those kind of two eras. That like that is preserved in a way, which... I've got one more before we move on, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know too much about this wrestler, but I do miss them. China, right?
Great shout.
If we're talking a few questions ago about people who made Triple H look good, China convinced me for a little bit that Triple H is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's because he wasn't over until she arrived. So that's what you're hitting on there, Josh. He was kind of nothing, actually, until China was something. Yeah.
By pure association, you know, is way better. And the stuff with Eddie Guerrero as well.
She was brilliant.
Which I missed at the time, but have since gone back to appreciate. I think like in the modern era, especially, probably a trite thing to say, you know, but with more athletes and the women's roster who are able to kind of embrace that style of physique and not be booked as like not an outright freak show, but more of a what am I looking for? Like just a special attraction, let's say. It's more ingrained and it's more normalized.
Strength is an attribute.
Exactly.
Yeah, not some sort of like circus.
Big time. Yeah, I always, every time China was on the screen, I was like, I'm kind of interested in where this is going and kind of captivated with this presence that you've kind of cut on screen.
It's thrown around a lot. and it's sometimes obviously a bit trite when you're talking about somebody that's passed away, a game changer. Right, like an actual game changer, no pun intended with the Triple H, but like in terms of perception towards the role of a woman in like mainstream North American wrestling, a total game changer. The amount of false starts at women's wrestling that like North America had done, like Japan was a different kettle of fish, but like certainly in America with WWE as the market leader and kind of as for good and bad, everything flows through them. The failed attempts at a women's division or the ultimate ending point of, say, lowest common denominator stuff when the wrestling doesn't necessarily move the needle in the quarter hours or financially or whatever. For China to, and this was how we had to view it at the time, unfortunately, for China to be on the level of the men was the phrase. Like, was the first step that a woman could take to that, for that to not be the qualifier anymore. Yeah. We don't talk about that now. We don't talk about Becky Lynch. But Becky Lynch, you know, she's kind of on the level of the men now. She's just Becky Lynch. She's a WWE superstar. She's a main eventer. She's class. Yeah. But that was the terminology. That was how you would rank a woman's performance, was based on how close she was to being as big a star as the men. Now, you know, it's still there a little bit, but it's nowhere near what it was then. Men that wouldn't take a punch, take a body slam, or work a match against her. Yeah. Because it would be seen as looking weak. Crazy. I can't have a woman slamming me. I can't sell for a woman. Yeah. You know? Mick Foley, you point out, was one of the first to say, do whatever you want to me. He was feuding with Triple H in the summer of 1997. Think of the things that Mick Foley has done to himself, and he considers China slamming the cage door on his head as one of the most brutal bumps he's ever taken. Really? Because she did not know her own. She was new to the game, and she didn't know her own strength. She like cracks him in the head, and he talks about it to this day as like top three. Wow, hardest hits he ever took, right? Because she just didn't know how much she was bringing to the table, and he was an advocate for her of like, guys, you are not losing anything taking your lumps off China. You're actually putting her over, which in turn gets your match more over and makes it more memorable. I love that. But she needed advocates like that because there were so many that were old and stubborn and bullheaded about it. You know, the original DX helped her immensely because having Shawn Michaels to go to bat for you. You know, having Shawn Michaels' bad carrier Triple H to go to bat for you in that era, and her being such an integral figure in that. You know, she was like the silence behind the violence of the Generation X. They were dicking about, but she was the real deal, and she was trouble. And it was, China was awesome. China was everything that people said she was, and it's a shame. It's a shame how it turned out, because wrestling does this to people ultimately, and the lifestyle and all that. So we're not going to go into that particularly, but if she gets out the other side of that tunnel, and even things like attitudes to sex work have changed. Yes. Triple H's statement, as ludicrous as it scans about, like, I don't know, my daughter's Googling China. Like, it's like, well, that was flawed when you said it. Yeah. But it'd be laughed at now. Yeah. Like, so the idea that now that would be, oh yeah, she did that for a living, so what? Yeah. And then into the Hall of Fame she goes, and back onto TV specials she appears and whatever. It could have been, it should have been really different how she was remembered. You're getting into, I suppose, wider policy and cultural differences, I suppose. But when you treat like the sex work that China did on the level as wrestlers who allegedly like killed people and did other abhorrent stuff, it's like they're not gone the same, deeply rare. They're not the same. The fact that was ever lumped in is like criminal in kind of hindsight. But like you said, I think as the years have gone on, especially recently, like that perspective has started to change, and like you mentioned, is being more celebrated, or at the very least a little bit more accepted. And as like the walls of sexism continue to tumble in society and in wrestling, the more that sort of stuff would be, again, just like rightfully kind of waved away. Yeah. Like, regardless of what it is. Sticking potentially with something sentimental, the one you'd protect with your whole life, whether they've got like just a special place in your heart from your any time as a fan, or if it's because they're underrated, or even now might be deserving of more praise on a podcast like this. Yes. Who would you go with? Well, he's not underrated, let me tell you that, but it's Cody Rhodes. And yeah, he's doing all right for himself. He's doing all right. He's made a name for himself. Yeah. You know, not a bad kid, that Cody Rhodes. No, I'd go to bat for him just because I know that he's not necessarily perfect. I know that he's said some dumb stuff in the past. He sometimes gets in his own way, but like that narrative of that storyline, I suppose, the real life and fictional storyline of you are the son of this like respected seminal figure in the business. You come from a wrestling family, you got wrestling siblings, and you're sort of wasted intentionally or otherwise with your time initially with WWE. You're kind of stuck into this position as this mid-carder or joke character or whatever it is. And then that like
self-determinism, I suppose, of being like, I know I'm better than this. I know I deserve a little bit more respect than this. I'm going to go and I'm going to do my own thing. It's kind of like every person, and then I'm not saying Cody Rhodes came from nothing. Like I said, he came from this wrestling dynasty. But if you come from nothing, right, it's kind of like that idea of meritocracy that kind of doesn't exist. Like the belief in that fiction, I like buy into a lot, and the idea that this is a person who kind of booked all the trends and was the exception and went away, improved himself, and then came back and is the face of the company and is beloved and is kind of doing something that hasn't been done in a little while by being this, for now anyway, who knows if this will change in the future, but for now, like this pure babyface character who is over and is doing things a little bit different and kind of harkening back to that kind of classic era of wrestling and kind of melding legacy with originality. Like, hot take, I think he's pretty good. He's pretty good.
You know, the only Josh in my life who was really taken to Cody Rhodes in a way that I would have never expected.
Yes.
My youngest son might not love wrestling, but I know he loves Cody. Like I sort of remember what it felt like to like love a wrestler more than wrestling when I see how much like he's gravitated towards Cody Rhodes, the things that happen to him or the things that he does. And I wonder if like when Cody departs, if that's going to be it for him. Do you know what I mean? It's like he wants to know what's going on with him, and it's obviously that star magnetism. It's funny, like Cody Rhodes, in some respects, his story is the makings of a film. Yeah. But then is it because it's a film that we've seen a million times because it's more fictional than real?
Yeah.
Like the story, like if you end the Cody Rhodes film with him winning the WWE title, you're like, well, this is just like an inferior Rocky or an inferior every sporting achievement film I've ever seen. But it actually happened in real life, and you wouldn't need to change your thing. Yeah. Like, it's so bizarre in that regard. The worry would be, hang on, this is too boring because it actually follows a perfect narrative structure.
That's it. Like,
how has he done this?
It's why I feel a bit boring saying it, because it's like, oh, you like the guy who overcame adversity and came out on top. Like, oh, come on, get a more interesting pick. But the fact that it did happen, and until now has kind of gone off without a hitch, I think is just like, it feels so rare, especially when you've seen so many wrestlers either try or want to do it and just not succeed. And that element of him kind of coming back still in the Vince era, even though it was the declining years, and knowing how...
That was a risk.
That's it. Knowing
Massive
how
risk.
other wrestlers have been treated when they have been left and come back, and not being able to get the top spot, even if they have maybe been initially celebrated because they sell tickets and sell merch, like kind of booking that trend and then eventually like becoming the guy. I think that's also makes it notable.
There's you say he protects Cody Rhodes, and I kind of feel that way too, having taken a long time to come around to him. It was in the pandemic where he was on a particular run in AEW at the time. He lost a match in which he could never fight for the world title, and he won their mid-card title, the TNT title, and he held that like a world title to him in the absence of being able to, and he defended it every week. And the pandemic was obviously a difficult time for wrestlers, anyone in entertainment, and there was an open challenge, and people got jobs. Eddie Kingston, Ricky Starks got jobs through how good their match with Cody Rhodes on television was, and Cody Rhodes saying all the right things, and wrestling fans been like, oh my God, we've got this guy, or whatever, and got jobs at a time when it would never been harder to get work in wrestling on the #2 wrestling. And I was so impressed with like him as a leader in a way that I think I'd stubbornly like cut my nose off to spite my face with him, because I was like, he's leading the opposition and he's doing a really good job of it, and he's this beloved figure. But like, he uses the word, but I think it's so true to apply it to him. So he makes you speak in the cliches that he himself would parrot, but it's because they're true. He is undeniable. Cody Rhodes he likes undesirable to undeniable. It's true. He was undeniable in every single metric with which you could judge a wrestler. Sige likes the take that it's a wrestling cliche that like a lot of wrestlers, in their attempt to sound affable, and they're entering one of the most capitalistic games in town, and they want to pretend like they're not. But they'll say like, I want to make my money, I want to be a star, but really I just want to leave this business better than I found it. So many of them are lying. Cody Rhodes isn't. Cody Rhodes has left wrestling substantially better than he found it. Not just with the formation of AEW, and not just I think with this this kind of, to your point, like renewed belief in what can happen if you change companies or if you kind of take those big gambles, but in how he has reminded people that like you can use as many of the old tricks and make them new again. He is like an action man. He calls himself the quarterback, head quarterback. Has there ever been less of a time in pop culture where we've wanted the jock white guy to like lead the way? And yet he does it, and he does it affably. You know, like it shouldn't be Cody Rhodes' time.
Yes, that's a good
and
point.
Yet, you know, like that it shouldn't be the guy that sort of, and he brings together so many qualities of the guys that came before him. So like it is the grit of Stone Cold Steve Austin meets the Hollywood aura of The Rock, meets the kind of clean cutness of John Cena, you know, meets the work rate of a Daniel Bryan, of a Shawn Michaels, of a Bret Hart. Like the manner in which he's combined just enough of all of the above to kind of carve his own way and do it in 2 or 3 of the most unlikely of paths it is a remarkable film-like story, but a film that might bore people and they might not watch because there's no where's the twist, where's the actual, you know, what is it? Is it equilibrium, disequilibrium, equilibrium?
Yeah.
Like, you made the disc look like the new equilibrium.
Literally, right.
What we should all do is, in fact, leave the market leader and like latch on to like a hot stable and make it even hotter, and then form an entire new company to rival that company, and then go back to the first. Well, where was that disequilibrium? Are you joking, mate? Like you tore the world up 6 times.
Yeah,
like
it's bad, man. I don't know, I could go on about it and just repeat everything that you just said because you put it way more eloquently than I can. But like even that coming back into friction with when he finally won the belt, you know, that run up to it in the pivot and the Royal Rumble and everything like that. Like even I don't know, man, like getting close to it and then still having that belief that like I can change this. I can go up against like the biggest draw in the company, someone who's now on the board of directors and whatnot. We've got this conglomerate that now owns the entire company, but what if, you know, I kind of stick to doing things kind of my way with the help, obviously. He's not doing it single-handedly, but what if we kind of just stick to this? Will it work? And then it works, and he can kind of smugly go,
can I stare down the rock?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a nice one for that, like, because it is, he doesn't need anyone's protection, does he?
No.
And yet still, you're right, Cody. You're right. You know, that kind of like.
Sometimes you need to protect, and this is going to sound stupid, sometimes you need to protect the biggest guy, because when you're the biggest guy, you've got almost half of the people who watch saying you shouldn't be the biggest guy.
That's a good point. Yeah,
you get sick of people who are at the top. It's why like almost all of my picks so far have never been like, maybe with the exception of maybe Shawn Michaels or so, but like the top guy. You know, it's not The Rock or Steve Austin, because like I don't know, like there's sometimes something just so appealing about them where you kind of get bored by the story in the same way that you might look at Cody Rhodes' story and say, well, where's the twist? Where is the new thing? Why are you channeling these old things? I kind of want something fresh now. You've won the belt. Where are you going to go with it next? And maybe he's had a little bit of that this year. Maybe the
I need him to win this frigging title. John Cena, he's killing the frigging territory. If you've watched this and Cody hasn't got it done at SummerSlam, we're in real trouble.
I know I don't even know what time it is, but we've got on quite a while. Do you want him to turn heel?
Not yet. I do, but not yet.
I agree.
John Cena broke the mold in so many ways, some good, lots bad. And the idea that you could never turn that character in the prime of his run, I think was flawed then, and I think it would be flawed to assume that of Cody now. There's a great heel in Cody. We've seen it. There's a fantastic heel in Cody Rhodes, but it's so hard to be an over babyface in an era where there's no monoculture, there's no sort of set way to be a good guy, and he's done it. So you ride that wave as long as you possibly can. When it'll feel right, it'll feel right. Do you know what I mean?
No,
like,
100%.
We're closer now than I thought we would have been maybe a year ago. I think this John Cena program's done a bit of damage to his babyface aura in that respect. It's invited people to not just universally love him for the first time, and that was maybe a mistake.
Right.
And WWE have got to kind of fix that. But we're a way off. But when it happens, it'll be cool.
Cool.
I have a lot of faith in the Cody Rhodes heel turn.
That's
in a
good.
way that I haven't in others, but I just don't want it just yet.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I didn't know where I sort of fell on that. I haven't been keeping up with the chatter as much as I used to in terms of that potentially happening, what the reaction would be like, but it felt like I was seeing people clamor for it a little bit more, and to me it seems way too early. When it does happen, it'll be sick, but not now.
Not quite now, no. Last but not least, number 7, the one you're rooting for the most. So who you are like actively supporting to succeed in the future. So yeah, Cody would be one for this, despite doing everything, I suppose. But I guess it's maybe somebody that hasn't yet hit that pinnacle for you.
I think a guy who's like, he's not hit his peak yet. I think he's got more to give. Maven Huffman? You ever heard of this guy?
I'm aware of his work.
You ever heard of this guy?
Yeah. I dare say the people watching us have only found us because they were watching a Maven video, because he gets 6 gazillion views. And then by luck, we might have appeared in his algorithm.
Yeah. Michael Hamflett's article was used as a reference in one of Maven's videos.
That popped me twice because it was obviously nice to see my name featured there, but it popped me more to be like, just checking in with Maven and guess who's popped up. Not like just checking in with Hamflett and he was talking about Maven. My friend Michael Hamflett on the Raw Review podcast mentioned Maven. No, the other way around. No. My buddy Maven mentioned you, Hamflett.
Yeah, Hamflett. I would know this guy. He's called Maven Huff, and he's sick. No, I don't know why. There's something about him. Like, I don't even like love him as a person necessarily. Sometimes he like says stuff in the interviews that he does with wrestlers, and I'm thinking like, why am I watching you as you know, dedicatedly as I am? But I like the idea of this guy who got into the company all those years ago via a reality show and then was not quite good enough, and by his own admission didn't do enough to stay at the level, goes through all of his personal demons, you know, gets like arrested and stuff, has his addictions, gets over that, is now in the place where he's making like these YouTube videos, which are hilariously clickbaity as anything. Like, I know it's us talking, but he's even a step above, right? But like, just I want to see him do well. I'd love to see him in any company, like even just as like a commentating gig or a presenting gig, because I know he wants it. When he talks about like, would he go back? Or maybe if they ask. There's something in the way he answers Michael Hamflett where I'm like, you want this, and I think it's fine to say you want it.
Yeah. He is. To fans of a certain era or maybe of a certain age, he is, I think I can use this tag, he's a cult favourite, Maven.
Right.
Because he was, you're right, he wasn't good enough, but he was way better in terms of where you would expect a reality TV winner to be. Yeah. Way better. Like, natural instincts were really, really good. Natural instincts as a babyface, which is harder than heel. Really, really good. Likeable. Just earnestly likeable. Was in a Shark Tank version of WWE where some of the biggest stars didn't manage that, let alone somebody that's coming and doesn't know right from wrong etiquette-wise, sometimes doesn't know his arse from his elbow in a match and doesn't know what he might do that could impact him politically or whatever, you know, that he's talked about in his videos, right? But like, his theme music, like, I am not exaggerating when I say this, like, there were sometimes Steve Austin glass break pops to that Tough Enough theme that he was given that is really hard to come by online because it wasn't licensed at the time. So then when you watch old Maven clips, it's got this like diet elevator music version of it. But when you watch a Maven match and you get that hit, I'm telling you, man, like with that music hitting, there was something to Maven, and I don't know if like, nostalgia is kind to Maven, of course, but like, and the Undertaker spot is kind of his most memorable moment, and again illustrates what can happen if a star just actually surrenders to the moment. I mean, he absolutely beat the shit out of him in the aftermath of that elimination, but the elimination itself is what people remember. Yeah. You can stop the video there and be like, good job, Undertaker. Stop the video.
That's the one that immediately follows with the chair shot.
That's correct. Yes, that's why I said stop the video. He smashes him all over the arena for like 10 minutes. It's crazy. Cool. It's like it's the biggest burial in when somebody's putting somebody over.
I mean, the dead man's the nicest guy wrestling I've heard. So
that's it. Yeah, drink this bottle of Jack. It'll make your blood look better when I bust you wide open from hand to hand. The Maven phenomenon, if you can sort of call it that now, I think is rooted genuinely in partially clickbait, but a lot of people that felt like they wanted more than they never got from Maven, and they'll take a YouTube channel, they'll take his stories because they never got to see it on screen. I honestly, truly believe that. There was a point where, when he came in, there was such a thirst. You got a sort of, the landscape was 2001, WCW was gone, ECW was gone, WWE were well into botching the invasion angle and proving that they never really wanted the competition. Or certainly Vince McMahon didn't want the competition. He wanted to throttle the competition and just have it all of his own. Maven was this outlier. He wasn't somebody that was like about to become damaged goods from one of the other promotions because WWE couldn't book them. He wasn't a WWE guy that suddenly felt quite out of time because 6 WCW cruiserweights have just come in and taken your spot. Like an X-Pac, who I love, Sean Waltman. But for a guy that had only been kicking around like sort of back in WWE 2 or 3 years, it was something like, out of the way, yo! Like, we've got Eddie Guerrero, we've got, you know, to use the example we've talked about, we've got Rey Mysterio, we've got so many guys that like make you look like a fossil, you 29-year-old wrestler. Like, so Maven was none of that.
Yeah.
He was a talent show guy, and he had an amazing body, but talent show makes you relatable. Talent show shows you queuing up outside WWF New York on Times Square and hoping to get your opportunity.
Yes.
And of course some of that's at work, obviously. I'm sure he'd done bump classes at his local wrestling school, whatever. But there was a relatable element of that, and you weren't as clued into the What, you mean so he didn't shake hands with Bob Holly? It means he's not going to get a push anymore. You just assume, wow, they've let somebody walk in the front door. The wrestlers were fuming. And you didn't know that. God respect the business. You were just like, oh, great. Like, this is how it can work for a guy. Yeah. And it did. It made you back him. And, like, he did have a really nice drop kick, and he could bump and feed quite well. And then, I think he'd be the first to admit the things that worked against him. But it wasn't just him. It was absolutely a system that wasn't necessarily set up to support a guy like him. You could do the talent show story now, and WWE have tried and failed this loads of times because they kind of get caught up in their own difficult relationship with the kayfabe of it all. How much are we prepared to show the audience about what is real and fake about this? And then their journey beyond that, how much are we prepared to be like, what if a guy wins a talent show and then 6 weeks later he's the WWE champion? Like, is that not a bit like here in the UK, somebody winning the X Factor and getting the Christmas #1?
Yeah.
Should that not be actually proof of your concept? But in wrestling's warped way, it's like, well, now he's won the talent contest. We've got to make him basically seem like the worst guy to ever lace up a pair of boots. It's like, well, hang on. But then he's won your talent contest. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
There's a real sort of impasse there that they've never been able to quite figure out.
Yeah.
But Maven felt like the guy that was closest to it. And I think there was a lot of people felt like there was so much more to do. Yeah. And then when this YouTube channel launched, it's like, great, I got my Maven.
Exactly.
I got my Maven content. I've been jonesing for this.
That relatability, I think, is absolutely key to it, and it has helped him become a cult sort of figure, both during his time and with Tough Enough, and then now with the YouTube channel. Like, even like seeing him now on the YouTube channel where he's driving around in cars that I'll never be able to afford, and like he's got a lovely house, a lovely family and stuff. I'm like, he's still still that element of. He reminds me of, maybe a wrestling style from the 80s or even into the 90s of someone kind of going town to town, isn't making the outright millions of dollars, is kind of getting by and having a good life, but is kind of mucking in with everything. And
pointing a camera in a grizzled veteran's face so that he can monetize it.
Yeah, and he's trying to get his bag. He's like, no, you know what, this is valuable. And he's still kind of got that, like, it's certainly, it's not a grift mentality, but it's a graft mentality. It's nice. Like I need to work. You know what I mean? I'm gonna work. I'm gonna muck in. I'm gonna like try this thing that I've never tried before, and I'm gonna see how far it takes me. And it's very relatable. I like it.
I like that. What an unexpected but brilliant way to end our 7 wrestlers theory. It all ends with Maven in the end. Thank you very much for watching or listening along with myself and Josh and Nicholas today. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can do so at WhatCulture WWE on X/Twitter, where you can also find Josh Brown at
Josh BROOWN.
We can find our brilliant producer Adam Nicholas at
It's Adam Nicholas.
And you can find me at Michael Hamflett. There will be more of this sort of stuff coming as we continue to navigate wacky summer in place of some of our regular daily wrestling podcasts. But otherwise, there will be sort of other stuff on the YouTube channel and on the podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, we will see you soon.